This episode is sponsored by PPC Zimbabwe.
Hello there, Tando Book Club lovers. This season, we're putting the books written by your favorite African female authors center stage. And joining me in the studio as co-host is the fabulous and amazing book reviewer, Sarah Nyengerai. As is our custom, we always begin every episode with a quote from a famous African that we believe captures the spirit and message of our book discussion. Naturally, we have chosen a quote from the book we'll be talking about today. Today's quote is, "But as much as I wanted to turn and walk away, I knew deep down I could not turn my back on him. Even after all the betrayal, lies, and animosity, he was still the father of my children." The polygamist, Sunyati. So Sarah, this book is probably, and still remains, one of Sunyati's most acclaimed in terms of popular acclaim, right? It was very well received, and a lot of people became fans of her because of this book. Why do you think this particular first book is so emotive and so captivating for so many people?
I'll start by saying there's something about the polygamist. Having read Gold Diggers, having read A Family Affair, I'm still yet to read her latest, but there's just something special about the polygamist. And I think it's to do with the time at which Zimbabweans got to know of it, or a time that it was now widespread within the Zimbabwean market, which is not necessarily the date of publication. Mm-hmm. But it's the storyline which resonates with what was a kept secret. And Sue decided to talk about it, to talk about the one thing we knew what was happening, that was happening in our homes, that was hush-hush. And she put this book out, and each person I spoke to who read it would say, the most amazing thing about this book, you know someone like that. Mm-hmm. We're referring to each of her characters. Mm-hmm. You know someone like that in your life. Not someone you've heard of, but you've encountered a Joyce. Mm-hmm. You've encountered Essie. Mm-hmm. And they're within family, and they're within our social circles. So it resonated with a lot of Zimbabweans, because she brings to light an issue that we were not talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And I love what you said about how we know someone like that. But I think also there's an aspect in terms of the societal attitude towards love that each of Jonasi's wives represent, and together they bring up the conversation we're having in Zimbabwe about the quality of our marriages, the quality of love that we share, and the relationships that we have. It was interesting to me that, when you read a lot of the reviews, a lot of people talk about this as African chick lit, right? People were not sure whether this was a literary piece of work or whether this was just some really popular fiction. Was it a trashy novel, a gossipy novel, I've heard somebody say. It was her first book, and I do think there is something to what people say about the later books being somewhat better. But actually, I think the polygamist being the one I encountered last, there is something that's very true to Sue that remains consistent in all of her work. And I was happy to see that there. And I do agree with you, speaking on taboo issues, namely infidelity, polygamy, and HIV and AIDS.
Yes.
And so that was really very interesting. How did you feel about the flow of the story?
I felt the story was well written. I like that a chapter is dedicated to a character. Mm-hmm. So it's not redundant, as opposed to the numbering of chapters. So I liked that, okay, we start with Joyce, and each character gets their moment, gets their time. And Sue is an empathetic writer in that she allows you to understand the person's full story. Mm-hmm. The reasoning behind the choices they've made, the crosses they bear, the crossroads they come to, and why they make certain decisions. So you end up having a love-hate relationship with even the rivals or the dark horse. She's empathetic in that way.
Totally, totally. And I really, really appreciate that, because I think it adds a little depth to the discussion around polygamy itself and infidelity, because there's actually a weaving in and out of both. And I think that the fine line between the two is obviously transparency in the relationship and all the parties in the relationship. But let's pause there for now. We're running out of time, but we'll be back shortly, and we'll be talking about characters we loved and maybe didn't love so much, or as Sarah said, loved and hated at the same time. So you don't want to miss that, because it's going to be a very spirited discussion. So we'll see you just now. Stay tuned.
Empowering women with strength beyond. This episode is sponsored by PPC Zimbabwe.
Women have been the foundation of society for generations. We play a critical role in building and sustaining healthy communities within our families and beyond. In light of this importance, it is only suitable that we celebrate ourselves as the amazing women we are, and as an essential part of our societies. As members of families, we provide invaluable support to those around us, whether we're making meals or providing emotional comfort during difficult times. And while doing so, we are pushing boundaries, breaking molds set by previous generations, and showing possibilities nobody thought existed. As we make potent contributions to business endeavors with our brilliant ideas from which everyone could benefit, irrespective of the field. Be they passionate entrepreneurs, launching companies alone, or thriving alongside male partners in startups, there is no denying our versatility when working together towards common goals with strength beyond. PPC Zimbabwe celebrates all women from all walks of life this Women's Month.
Welcome back. You're watching the Tando Book Club, and we're talking The Polygamist by Sue Nyati, and I've got Sarah Nyengerai in the studio to help me review the book. So Sarah, you know we love to talk about characters we least liked and characters we did like. Were there any characters that were likable in this book at all?
Thank you, Selina, for that question. I'm not so sure about a favorite character, but I was drawn to two of the women, Matipa and Lindani, and I'll explain why. I like Matipa because she's sassy, ambitious, wants to climb the corporate ladder, unfortunately by any means necessary. And this is not to say she's not intelligent and she doesn't have a brain. She is just using everything at her disposal. And she knows she has the X factor. Jonasi finds her sexually confident persona he's drawn to that, and it appeals to his ego. So I liked Matipa's story because her arrival is like an upset, almost like it's a domino effect. He goes into overdrive with becoming a fully fledged polygamist. Lindani I liked because I felt that she would have been a Matipa had she had maybe a background of means. If she had come from parents that had money or were able to get her through to university and further education. She settles for being a slave queen, but she had the potential to also be career and make it in corporate, but just different means.
I just, in my mind, when you were talking about Lindani, I'm like, I'm just like, yeah. And knowing her story and sort of the choices she makes towards the end, I'm also like, oh, but that little hoe, basically. These four women, I think for me, and their postures towards Jonasi are, I think, part of an ongoing longer conversation that women in Zimbabwe have been having about men and infidelity. And some of the things that they are posing in the conversation is, once a cheater, always a cheater. I think that's something to explore there. Also, the other thing they're posing, I think, is what is it about men that as they are successful, they feel the need to acquire more women on their arm? What is that about? And a lot of reviews speak to out of sympathy for Joyce, the first wife, that
Yes.
she was the cheerleader, she was there kind of building him up. But even when we begin to appreciate Essie's presence in his life, one of my questions is, was Jonasi just a cheater at heart? Like, this is just who he was. He had good intentions at some point, but really he just could not overcome this aspect of his character. It was like unfinished business in terms of his development, and this is just who he came to be. Because you don't get AIDS from being somebody who's having decent sex with multiple partners. You get that because you feel entitled to a certain level of sexual intimacy from the people that you're with, that it almost has a double standard and a lack of transparency to it, unless I'm being too heavy-handed on him.
No, it's from his philandering. He
Yes.
was a philanderer. And the money and the success, I believe, is used to justify it, but you still see traces of philandering even from people within, say, poverty. He was by nature, I felt, narcissistic and a philanderer.
Well, narcissistic, yeah, that's big. So for me also, I think it's also the issue when we look at Lindani, younger models, what is it about men? I think that's also part of the conversation. I think transactional relationships, because money was the driver and the acquisition and what made him attractive. And that's very interesting to me in terms of the conversation that these women posit in this thing. And then I think, of course, with me for Essie, I think it's just the issue that what is it about men abandoning, first loves, or why do they feel like they can be with someone they can't pretend with, but then still want the trophy that they want to pretend with? What is that about?
Because he speaks about, no one knew me the way Essie did. She knew who I was because she was from the hood where he grew up. And you were like, so why did you not end up with her?
Yeah, very good question. Well, we are running out of time for this segment, and we'll be taking a short break. But we'll be back in a few moments, and we're going to do what we love to do here on the book club and have a reading from the book. You don't want to miss this, and if you're interested in understanding the difference between polygamy and infidelity, stay tuned.
Empowering women with strength beyond. This episode is sponsored by PPC Zimbabwe.
Women have been the foundation of society for generations. We play a critical role in building and sustaining healthy communities within our families and beyond. In light of this importance, it is only suitable that we celebrate ourselves as the amazing women we are, and as an essential part of our societies. As members of families, we provide invaluable support to those around us, whether we're making meals or providing emotional comfort during difficult times. And while doing so, we are pushing boundaries, breaking molds set by previous generations, and showing possibilities nobody thought existed. As we make potent contributions to business endeavors with our brilliant ideas from which everyone could benefit, irrespective of the field. Be they passionate entrepreneurs, launching companies alone, or thriving alongside male partners in startups, there is no denying our versatility when working together towards common goals with strength beyond. PPC Zimbabwe celebrates all women from all walks of life this Women's Month.
Welcome back. You're watching the Tando Book Club, and we're talking The Polygamist by Sunyati, and we've got Sarah Nyengerai to help us discuss this book. So Sarah, what would you say is the unique strength of this book?
Like books written by Sue, it tells a Zim story very well. I like that she gets into our homes, she gets into our families, she gets into our extended families and our relatives and exposed what at the time nobody was talking about, which is why when the book came out, people could identify. They knew someone like Joyce, they knew someone like Essie, like I said before. So it's a quick read, and it's full of character, it's full of experiences, and you feel good after putting it down. You're like that. It's entertaining, and she takes you through landscapes in Zimbabwe, Avenues Hospital, and when he visits Essie, to the burbs, the children in the private schools. It's just a beautiful landscape of our experiences as Zimbabweans. And she brought out the small house, brought to light the small house, because in essence, that's what the women were that came after Joyce.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that whole small house narrative and dynamic, there's something particularly Zimbabwean about it, because if we consider some of the other stories around polygamy that we've talked about, and that we'll be discussing in this season, there was definitely, I think, a lack of transparency in this story, secret marriages, for instance, and those kinds of things. And I think you can sympathize with, well, why were the women willing to be party to this deceit? And what does that say about the women's agency in and around that? So I do agree with you. I've always loved the fact that Sue is capturing our modern, our contemporary Zimbabwean history. And I love that because I think it's something that we needed. We needed to start to tell all of our different stories, because I think for a while we only had one story as Zimbabweans that we were trapped in. But I think these stories, especially Sue's stories, help us to unpack some of the legacies of just having that one story. And we're now actually beginning to see what that's doing to our social fabric, our families, and all of these things. And I think it helps us to begin to change the conversation as well. So I think that that is really, really powerful in terms of the strength of this, book. I would just like to hear from you quickly before we get into the reading. Any key life lessons?
Well, yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Because it gets messy.
Mm-hmm.
It really gets messy. And I don't want to discard or to judge why people make the choices that they make. But think about who you pair yourself with. Think about what you get into, because the women were abused, both financially, sexually, physical.
Yes, yeah.
So it's not it's a fun read, but it was real life and the pain of some of the situations that we're in. And so that's for women. I would say that. As for the men, like you reap what you sow. And that was Jonasi. You reap what you sow, it catches up. It's all fun and games till it's not fun and games.
Totally, 100%. And I think his resolution in the story does paint that picture very clearly. Sue left no doubt about that. I do also think, for me, in terms of life lessons, it's just there might have been a subtle nudge, I think, from Sue, that we don't only know women like that, but each one of us as women has a part of Essie in us, Joyce in us, even Lindani, and even Matipa in us. And those people in us are at war every time we encounter somebody that we love or are attracted to. And, then we make our choices. These women made theirs. The question is now, what will we make of our choices? We're about at that time where we would like to do the reading. And because Sue is not with us, Sarah, I'm going to make you do it.
No problem at all. Okay, I've taken, this is Joyce. And she's at home. I'll start from, he gave me a hurried kiss and turned away from me. I curled into him, pressing my back into him. The scent on his body filled my nostrils, the mark of another woman imprinted on him. I'm tired, Joyce. I turned away from him. The perfume now permeated my own body and almost choked my insides. The tears rolled down my cheeks. I bit down on my tongue to stop myself from crying out loud. I know you might think I'm naive, but I had never ever questioned my husband's fidelity. I promise you, it's something that never crossed my mind. Jonasi had never given me any reason to think he would ever cheat on me until that night. I woke up in the morning and wore a sunny smile and told myself everything was going to be all right. I got dressed and made sure the kids were ready for church. We left Jonasi, who was still sleeping. Every Sunday was the same in our home. I took the kids to church and Jonasi would recover from his Saturday night hangover. When we came home, we would have a family braai. Sunday was our day. However, when I came home from church and did not find Jonasi's car lodged in the driveway, my insides lurched. I knew then that everything was wrong. So very wrong.
And every woman knows that feeling when you know your partner is cheating on you. Well, we've run out of time for today's show. It's been another great edition of the book club as we talked The Polygamist. See you again next week, same time, as we celebrate yet another African female author. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, and stay true. Goodbye.
PPC Zimbabwe sponsors this empowering episode to help women discover strength beyond.
Nervous Conditions, being Tsitsi's book, as you say, told an untold Zim story about women, whether single, whether married, no matter how old.
The book is set in the 60s and 70s, so we know that's the period of the Bush War, the real struggle, so to speak. As you know, Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia as it was known then, is kind of figuring itself out. And so very brave to make a black girl the center of the story, because usually that period is told through men's voices.
Tsitsi is able to show us that there's good and bad in all cultures. Not one stands out or is more superior to the other.
It interrogated, I think, a lot of things people took for granted that, you know, they had been living through in their families in the 60s and 70s, and depoliticized our story, and, you know, brought it home for us in terms of who we are as people.
Women have been the foundation of society for generations. We play a critical role in building and sustaining healthy communities within our families and beyond. In light of this importance, it is only suitable that we celebrate ourselves as the amazing women we are and as an essential part of our societies. As members of families, we provide invaluable support to those around us, whether we're making meals or providing emotional comfort during difficult times. And while doing so, we are pushing boundaries, breaking molds set by previous generations, and showing possibilities nobody thought existed. As we make potent contributions to business endeavors with our brilliant ideas from which everyone could benefit, irrespective of the field. Be they passionate entrepreneurs, launching companies alone, or thriving alongside male partners in startups, there is no denying our versatility when working together towards common goals with strength beyond. PPC Zimbabwe celebrates all women from all walks of life this Women's Month.